things off first, I think the items discussion is a rather easy one. Sentry ward change, something I agree with, something I proposed. Healing wards as well. Everyone agrees, I think, that this is good. Sentry ward especially can be pretty busted, especially in pro play, early game, so much vision. That just makes sense. Now, Vampiric Potion, this is also something I suggested. I feel like early game items especially don't have enough items in the pool. That means there's not enough different items you can find. Makes the game very predictable, pretty boring. I thought it would be interesting to have more items there possible, which is why I suggested Vampiric Potion and Rune of Lesser Healing for the Wand of Illusion camp. Now, I've heard many people say that this is too strong. And I think they might be right. It's kind of hard to tell because we don't know the exact numbers on Vampiric Potion, especially. And Lesser Healing Rune, that's 125 healing. That's 25 less than a Rune of Healing. And I think I agree with other people saying that they're too strong. I was perhaps a bit too excited to suggest these changes because I'm a big fan of new additions, of having something new in the game. I'm very eager to make changes, and sometimes perhaps I don't respect the danger enough. And this is one of those examples. Perhaps this is too strong. And Vampiric Potion is 12 damage for 20 seconds. That can be pretty strong, especially in the early game, in the right situation. But where it's really, really good is the lifesteal. And the lifesteal plus damage, the danger here is it can be especially good only on some heroes. That means on some heroes it's bad, on some it's average, and on some others it's insanely good. So who wants healing and who wants damage? Two heroes especially, Blade and Demon. For those two, it would be way better than for everybody else, especially because of the lifesteal. They have high attack speed, good damage output. They will always take damage because they're in the front line. So that's why healing, in this case also lifesteal, is so good for them. Now, the weird thing about this is, where is it? Consumed. We don't know exactly how much lifesteal this is. Here in the... Oh, wait. Wait. You can't see it properly. I'm in the way. Shit. But in the official, on the official site... Oh my god. On the official site here, it says, adds 12 bonus damage and life stealing to a hero. Last 20 seconds. Now, I think they didn't have an entry on Liquipedia. Let's look if they do have it now. Vampiric Potion. Because they don't even have it here. It is such a weird item that was never seen. We actually don't know how much lifesteal this is exactly. I read somewhere that it's 75% lifesteal, which is really high. Of course, in balancing a game, everything comes down to numbers. So everything can be tweaked by the right amount of numbers to the proper point. I think 12 bonus damage is really good, but of course you have to remember it only lasts for 20 seconds. That's less than half the time of Scroll the Beast. Scroll the Beast is 45 seconds for your entire army, 25% damage bonus. This only on one hero, only in 20 seconds. So I think this could still be included in the game if we shrink the life-stealing aspect to where it's not that dangerous, especially on those, melee, edgy heroes like Blade and Demon. I can also understand, though, if that is just... hold on, where are we? If that is just, a bit too dangerous, if people feel like this is too much, but I feel like this could still be included if we adjust the values, the numbers, correctly. Vampiric Potion, if it only gave, say, 20% lifesteal instead of 70, or however much it is. I mean, we don't know. Maybe we could look it up in the world editor, but I'm not very good with the world editor, to be honest. But I feel like if this was only 15% maybe. If we want to play it safe, we can just do 15% lifesteal. Then I think this item would be fine to include. The boring thing about this is, if it's only 15% lifesteal, then is it really a vampiric potion, right? The cool thing about the potion would be you use it, and then you lifesteal a lot for a short period. That gives it impact. But that would also make it really strong, especially on a small subset of heroes. So either we can go heavy into the fantasy, which is kind of imbalanced, or we can go shrink the lifesteal numbers, make it better, make it not as blatantly better for certain heroes, but then it would be a bit less interesting. That's oftentimes the difficult balance that game developers and balance designers have to strike. How cool and interesting do you want to have the item or the ability or the unit or whatever, while how much in line does it have to be with balance? Here I would say it's worth sacrificing a bit of the fantasy, reducing the lifesteal, and just focusing on the damage aspect more. Because damage everyone can use. Doesn't matter if you're an Archmage, Mountain King, Blade Master, Keeper, everyone likes damage. So I think having 12 damage for 20 seconds is fine, but having too much lifesteal is not, is what I would say. Rune of Lesser Healing. Everyone was very flabbergasted by this one. Of course, it is very strong when you can find that, especially in the mid game when you have lots of units that are already hurt. I can understand if people feel like this shouldn't be included. That's not something I would fight. I would be, like I said, excited to see more drops, but if people collectively feel like this is too strong, then I would say, okay. 125 healing especially is probably too much. A heal scroll, for example, is 150 healing, right? So that's 250 gold. Of course, the big advantage of heal scroll is you can time it exactly when you want. You can carry it around. So that's a big, big advantage. Rune of healing is on the ground. You have to pick it up right there. You can't choose it whenever you want, after a Breath of Fire or whatever, so that's the downside. But of course, you could get it in the early game at a green camp already. So I definitely agree that would be too strong in the current state. Again, here I was perhaps a bit over-eager to include something new. This one we can also find on the Blizzard page under, what was it again? Power-ups, right? Yeah. So Rune of Healing is 125 hit points restored. Yeah, that's too much. That is certainly too much. Again, here I think we could adjust the numbers to make it proper for that item drop, for that green camp consumable. What if it was 80 HP? 75 HP? I think if it was between 70 to 80, 90 HP, I think then it would make sense. That would mean Blizzard would have to change the Rune of Lesser Healing, what it means in the game. That would mean it's also not neatly, half the value of Rune of Healing. So that would be a bit asymmetric. But again, here I come back to the point where how much are you willing to prioritize balance in your game as a game developer? Not always an easy decision to make, but this long into the life cycle of Warcraft 3, when all of the interest nowadays of people still playing is the competitive side, then I feel like focusing on balance is warranted. But from what I heard from people so far is, well, Rune of Healing, that's a joke. That's way too good for this item drop. And with the current numbers, I agree. I still feel like there's a way to include this. Like I said, if it's 70 HP, 80 HP healing, there is a sweet spot to be found here. But I wouldn't be distraught if this was not included in the new patch. But I think something new is cool, something novel to include and to discover and to, experiment with is cool. After so many years, discovering something new and including it could really add to variety and, interesting plays. Ring of Protection, also I think almost everyone agrees with this. This item is way too good on the small green cams. Ring plus 4, getting nerfed to Ring plus 3 here is very proper. I would also say that Ring plus 5 should be reduced to Ring plus 4, but it's not as important because there's fewer camps and lower chances. All right, that's good. So, backpack shop requirement removed. What exactly does this mean? Does this mean you don't need to research it anymore to use backpack? Probably not. This probably just means that to research backpack, you don't need to have a shop anymore. Which is good, I guess. There is one thing to keep in mind here, by the way. Buffing backpack would be especially good for two races, Orc and Undead. They have the best items from the shop early game, and they use the shop the most in the early game. So this is something you need to keep in the back of your mind. However, it would be still good to see more plays being utilized and being encouraged with backpack. The problem with backpack, though, is most of the time, maybe not for human, but certainly for Undead and Orc, it's not that you need a shop to research it. It's that it's a research requirement in the main building. Because normally, lumber is pretty low, especially before tier 2 tech, and you always want to tier 2 tech as fast as you can. But when you do, you cannot research backpack. So if you really want to encourage more backpack play, especially earlier in the game, then the backpack upgrade needs to be moved to something else other than the main building. I think it was Grubby who suggested to move the research upgrade to the shop, which would make sense. It's also kind of weird though, because you can't research anything else in the shop. You can only buy items. And then does every shop have another slot available to have the backpack upgrade placed in? I think so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. I think what would also work and make sense is to have the backpack upgrade moved to the altar. Because in the altar, we have lots of room, because there's only 4 heroes in the altar for every race, so there's enough room on the card. It also does make sense, because items are for heroes, and then in the altar, which is for heroes, you can research backpack. That would mean you can tech and then go for backpack, and that would encourage certainly a lot more play of it. And you could still remove the shop requirement. But if the shop requirement isn't removed, then still we will not see much backpack because it's in the main. Orb of Darkness will now spawn level 2 skeletons. This might not ever be relevant because we only ever see this on Twisted Meadows, and we don't see much Twisted Meadows. But it is a pretty weak item, so I am largely in favor. Ancient Django getting buffed a little bit again. Legion Doomhorn getting buffed a little bit again. Is that good? Movement speed is really good in this game. Now, this was a big nerf to before. It was reduced down to 5%. Now it's going to 7.5%. It's still worse than the normal aura. It is a red camp item. It's supposed to be good. It makes it more in line with the Khadgars, which is the best item in the game right now. In most cases. I think this is fine. This is not something we have to get hung up on. All right, now we get to the racial part, which is, just as in real life, going to be a little bit more difficult and sensitive. Militia armor reduced from 4 to 3. I do not like this change. I've seen many people be in favor of this change, and I can understand why. Human is very strong in the early game, especially defensively, with militia, with strong heroes, which they have from strong creeping because of the militia creeping help, and that all synergizes nicely together to make them very strong in the early game, and especially defensively. I think that's a good thing. This is my big point about my balance suggestions that I made before. My general goal, my biggest goal was encourage more expansion play. I think more expansions, the more games that we have with 2 bases minimum on each side, the better the game is in almost every case. In my video before, I especially talked about Undead versus Human, how in the past Undead was forced to play 1 base and led to a very boring game. And since it became 2 base, it blew up in complexity and in beauty to watch. I think being strong defensively is great for the meta. If you're strong defensively, you can expand, and once you can expand, especially if you can expand early, the possibilities are manifold, and you can experiment in so many ways. This weakens early game and defense for Human. Now, this makes sense if they are the only race stronger than everyone else defensively, which you could argue that they are. But I think, in my opinion, this is the wrong approach. I think the way to go shouldn't be to weaken Human early game. It should be to raise the floor for everyone else. Make them stronger early, or at least stronger at expanding. That's why I suggested making Night Elf and Orc especially stronger at expanding, and maybe Undead a little bit, because of course Human is the best race at fast expanding at the moment. I also suggested lengthening the research time of Tier 2, because faster Tier 2 means more difficult of a time for the defensive player to secure the expansion. If you're expanding and your opponent reaches Tier 2 later, you have an easier time expanding. I can understand why Blizzard didn't want to go for it. It seems a little bit clumsy, the way I proposed it. I'm pretty sure this would work, but it's not very elegant. I suggested increasing the Tier 2 tech time by 25 seconds, and to compensate, reducing the Tier 3 tech time by 20 seconds. This makes it not very symmetrical, but this would, I think, be very healthy for the meta. I think the way we make the meta the best it can be is more expansions and more tier 3. This would achieve both those things. But I can understand, because of the inelegance, that Blizzard may not want to go for it. But that's not the only way to achieve it, by the way. You don't have to shorten tier 3 time and lengthen tech time to tier 2. You can just also make expansions easier, which of course later for Orc they will do. But that is... you cannot just make this change and then not address anything else when it comes to expansions. This cannot be in a vacuum, but we'll get to that later. So, in short, I think this is not right. I think being defensively strong is good for everyone and good for the meta. Now, defend is getting a change. It's getting made cheaper and a bit faster in the research, but it's also getting made weaker quite a bit, by the way. This is quite a bit. This means instead of... when footies take damage, instead of taking 35 damage, they will now take 50 damage. Right? Like it was 65 damage reduction before, now it's going to be 50. This is a huge nerf. Huge. Of course, the percentage of the time, footies reflect damage back from piercing, so there they take 0 damage, so it doesn't matter. But the other time, they reduce damage. And it used to be 65. So from 35 to 50, I should have done the math on that before. How much is that percentage-wise? That's almost a 50% increase, right? In damage that they take. Is that true? Wait. Half of 35 is 17.5 plus 35 is 52.5. So it's a little bit less than 50%. That's a big nerf, bro. That is a really big nerf. What does that mean? Probably, most specifically, it means headhunters are way better. In the past, also, Human played a ton of footies against Fiends, but right now the meta is about ghouls and expansion, so there it doesn't really matter. It's going to be a lot worse against Headhunters and a lot worse against... a lot worse against Archers. Big nerf that I, again, do not agree with. I'm going to be a bit biased here because I really have... I've internalized this. I think really expansion play, fast expo or tier 2 expo is the healthiest way, the most beautiful way that Warcraft can be played. And in many, many games, Human will fast expand and then use footies and footies, wave after wave, so many with defend to hold on against an attack. This is a big nerf to footy defend. This might make expansion in many cases unplayable. Can you still play expansion against Orc with Headhunters? Maybe not. Can you still play expansion against Demon Hunter and Archers with that? Maybe not. And that is why I strongly disagree with this change. Yes, defend is strong. Yes, defend can be annoying. And a lot of people have been complaining about this. I think especially Orcs, when they have burrows and Headhunters, it's hard to deal with Footmen. But it's not like there is zero counter. You can go Grunts, you can go Wolves or Blade Master, both are okay against them, both are not amazing. I get that they are pesky, but I think this is gonna be disastrous for expansion play. And that is my priority. How can we ensure expansion play? And this is, I think, very damaging and not the right way to go. Siphon Mana nerf. Yeah, I agree with this one, certainly. My nerf suggestion was a different one. Mine was increase the cooldown so that if you can cancel Siphon, then there is more of a window for you to punish the misplay or at least the ability to disrupt on your end. And I think this is also good. The Blood Mage has to get in a bit closer, but I would like to see a little bit more drastic of a change. So this means he has to get into 500 range to start Siphon, right? That's good. And then the hero he siphons has to run out of range for 700. If he's 700 range away, then the Siphon breaks. I think this should be reduced to 600. That would be a big nerf, but I think the annoying thing about Siphon is, Siphon, like many spells, should be good against some things and not good against others, especially when it's annoying stuff like Mana Burn. Siphon should pretty much, just by the way it's designed, always be good against melee heroes. When they run in and they're close to you, you siphon them, they can't get away too easily, boom, there you go, you got the counter to certain heroes. Against Panda, for example, they can be really good. Against Demon Hunter, for example, they can be really good. The annoying thing about Siphon is, right now, even against ranged heroes, it can be good. You're fighting against an orc, he's got Naga and Farseer, you use Siphon on them, and then, even if it doesn't last too long, but because the fight is protracted, you can still see lots of mana over time, it shouldn't be good against ranged heroes. The reason it is because it's 700 range. If you use it on a ranged hero and he walks back, it takes too long to break the leash of Siphon. If you're using it against a ranged hero and the opponent counterplays it quickly and well, Siphon should have minimal effect, in my opinion. Which is why I think this should be 600, not 700. So it's easier to break the leash. On ranged heroes especially. Slow duration, time reduction, fair. It's very annoying to be slowed for a full minute, and especially for orc for whom dispel can be difficult. This makes sense. Heal range increase, that's something I suggested, I think, can be possibly very strong, but priests with their AI are so annoying that I think this is fair. Same for Invis. The Invis cast range, super small. I think this is also very fair. Might encourage some more interesting play with something that has counters. Arcane Vault requirement removed for Dragonhawks and Cloud Upgrade. Interesting. I don't know if that's ever going to be relevant. Doesn't seem like it. But yeah. Like I say, some good changes, some bad changes, but also some I think that weren't considered at all that I think would be a good idea. These were my balanced suggestions that, again, should be posted under this video. I don't have to go through everything, but I want to highlight the ones I think they're missing out on the most. I think the most important one for our current problem in the meta, which is Pally Rifles. It's been clear, Pally Rifles, it's pretty broken for a while now. I think the biggest problem here is Blacksmith lumber cost. It used to be 60, then was reduced to 40, and since it was at 40, we've seen how broken Pally Rifles can be. I think if this was increased again to 60, Pally Rifles would be a lot more beatable. I've heard other world-class player suggest different nerfs. Starbuck, for example, said that what you want to do is increase Holy Light cooldown by 1 second, and that would help the issue. That would certainly make it a lot more weak in the later stages, but this would especially make Pally Rifles weaker early game, which I think is what would make sense and would be fair. Since Pally Rifles get so insanely strong in mid-game and late game, at least early game, they should be slower and weaker and more punishable, which is why I think this change should happen. And also, we saw a couple of nerfs there for human, but again, I come back to what's important to me. I would like to say more expansion play and more tier 3 play. If we could combine those two things, I'm going to say this again and again, sorry about that. I think this is going to make Warcraft way more exciting to watch and healthier in general as a game. So I would like to see meaningful tier 3 buffs for human. Not in the ultimate human late game army, because that one is very strong already as we know, but the transition to get there made easier to encourage more tier 3 play. Which is why I think Annual War Training should be a tier 2 upgrade. Sundering Blades should be available to knights innately, so it shouldn't require research anymore like it was before. They took that away, and they also nerfed Sundering Blades. Sundering Blades used to be 15% damage bonus against medium, now it's 10%. If you have it nerfed and requiring an upgrade, I think it's too weak. Either make it stronger with upgrade, or I think this would be the best. Give it to them innately at 10% damage value. And also, Orb of Fire. I really don't get why Blizzard is so hesitant to include this. This is such a safe change. Orb of Fire is the weakest in the game. It has some uses, but not many. It is cheap already, but not cheap enough. Do we want to make everything cheap and achievable and weak? No, we want to have some things just be good on its own. And what something you can always use is damage. Damage indeed. And especially earlier in the game, having increase to the hero damage is very valuable. This might also address Human Mirror, might encourage more tier 3 play when you get knights with the upgrade right away and you get a strong orb right away on tier 3 that is quite cheap. This might encourage more tier 3. And this is such a safe change as well. It is literally only 3 damage. It will be a very value upgrade on your hero if you have a good right clicker like an Archmage or maybe even a Pit Lord. Maybe that will encourage some different hero play. We see basically 0 Orb of Fire at the moment. Okay, not true. We see it against Undead only sometimes. Nowhere else. That means the Orb of Fire is nowhere to being dangerous. So having a sizable buff on it, I think only would make sense. I'm a bit disappointed that such an obvious, easy addition is not made. Maybe the consideration is human is then too strong on tier 3, but I don't see it. All right, next race coming up, mirror image for Orc. Cooldown being reduced by 2 seconds. I think this is fair. Mirror image has turned out to be quite strong indeed. But I wonder, is that the right lever to hit mirror image? Also, mirror image is basically only seen in one matchup. It's against Night Elf. And there it is definitely a big reason why Keeper and Hunts have fallen out of favor. But I would say that what you want to do more is buff the Keeper. Because the Keeper is weak everywhere right now. We're going to get to that later also when I'm going to talk about Night Elf. But it's fair. Mirror image can be very strong. But then again, how often do you have to reuse mirror image already after 3 seconds? Almost never. So, to be honest, I'm not sure mirror image has to be nerfed. I'm not sure this is the right nerf either if you want to nerf it. But it's not the wrong direction either, in my opinion. Alright, now this is one of the craziest changes of the patch. Taurens have now resistant skin by default. Whoa. Okay, that is a seismic change. That is huge. I like Grubby's point that he brought up about this. The cool thing about this is it gives the Tauren a specific role. Taurens and Grunts before were basically the same thing. They're a melee fighter. They're kind of tank. They're pretty tanky. Let's say they're pretty tanky for when you can get them. And they right click. And that's it. They have no abilities. That's just kind of, frontline tank. You can upgrade Pulverize, but it's a passive. Yeah. So they didn't really have a unique ability and unique posture in the game, in the meta. This makes the Tauren very interesting, would encourage much more play on him, and sounds pretty crazy, to be honest. In the spirit of transparency, I have to say, I'm a bit biased on this subject that should be taken into account because I love Taurens. It's my favorite unit in the game. And I would love to see this change come through to see how it works out. But if we go through with this change, then Blizzard has to be watching. This might turn out to be broken. We have to keep an eye on it. But unlike others, I don't think it's fair to say that it will be broken guaranteed. I don't think this is clear enough in speculation that we can propose right now. Because some things on paper look broken. Like Tauren's resistant skin, okay, that's great against things like slow and possession and ensnare. Absolutely. You know what's also insane on paper? Bears. Bears have the ability to give AoE buff to your entire army for 25% damage increase, and every bear that you make comes out with at least 1 rejuve. That's 400 healing every time from a bear that can then fight with Roar, and is just a good unit all around. That's why we see bears all the time. My point is this. If you didn't know that bears fit into the meta, if you just look at bears and their abilities in a vacuum, you're like, oh my god, this is broken. Sometimes, you cannot be sure if something is broken or too strong until you really see it in action. It also goes the other way. If something is not buffed to an extreme extent, but nerfed to an extreme extent, sometimes you think, wow, that goes way too far, this is way too huge of a nerf, and that will cripple the unit and the race. A recent example of this was statues. Statue mana regeneration used to be... Oh wait, was it 3? I have to look that up real quick. Obsidian statue. It used to be 3, right? Yeah. It used to be mana restored 3 to 2. That is a 33% nerf. That was huge. And many of us thought, oh my god, that goes way too far. But it didn't. Undead, well, statues certainly got a lot weaker after that, but Undead was still playable, especially because our great savior Happy showed us how to do it. My point is again the same. Just because it looks extreme on paper doesn't mean it has to be extreme. So I would like to see this, especially because it also fits thematically because Spirit Walkers are resistant already. They have resistant skin. Torrents then also being of the Torrent folk would also have resistant skin. It would give them a new role, a new identity. It's all things I like. And I would be down to see it play out. Like I said, I'm a bit biased here. I'm not trying to deny that. So I would like to see this go through testing and then be introduced into the live game. But again, this I must state twice and maybe thrice. Blizzard has to be watching. Because this is a danger. Okay, Blizzard, please, if you go through with this, then don't just go back to whatever else you're doing. We will have to keep a close eye on this. But I think it's exciting. And isn't excitement nice? Orb Lightning changes, moving on, make a lot of sense because Orb Lightning is pretty crap. And Venom Spears getting nerfed and Wyvern getting buffed. I don't know where this lands, to be honest. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how good or bad some of these changes are. Here, I don't know. I think it could make sense, but I cannot say with confidence. Right now, the only way Wyvern do work is against Undead, Mass Wyvern with Envenom Spears. And let's be honest, that meta sucks. It's so boring. It's so annoying. You do nothing in the early game except harass for a little bit. You don't go headhunters or anything. You rush Wyvern, you rush tier 3, and then you harass, you fly into the Undead's base, you try to punish him with Hex and maybe some Creepjacks. It is ass, to be honest. So this nerfs Wyvern with the damage output, but it buffs tier 2 Wyvern, but might nerf tier 3 Wyvern. Where exactly will this land? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. What I have learned is Mass Wyvern play is not it. It's not fun. It's not exciting. As in so many cases, mass air armies, pure air armies are just lame and not what we would want to see. But I can't say. I can't say where this is going to land them. I would rather see, though, for orcs, other units being more buffed and encouraged where it's fair. Like Headhunters, for example. Headhunters lately have not been looking that good. I suggested in my patch proposal a slight buff to Troll Regen, for example. That's units I would much rather see than Wyvern. Torrents, as I now said multiple times, I would love to see. But will we see them? Certainly not in every matchup. But yeah, I'm not sure about this. Not sure if it's good or bad. I can't say. Now, speaking of crazy changes, this one is also wild. I think this is really wrong. Now, in my patch suggestion, I kind of touched on a similar point. My point was that the ability for human late game spellbreakers to steal wards from the orc, I think that was too strong. I think if they use control magic on them, it should destroy them, not steal them and flip them in a fight. I thought that was way too strong. Now Blizzard's going heavy. They're bringing out the heavy guns. They're bringing out the howitzers. Every ward from the Witch Doctor is magic immune. That sounds crazy, dude. That sounds crazy. Especially with Heal Ward, you could argue it's okay because Heal Ward only 5 HP. Everything one-shots it. But Stasis Trap is like 100 HP or something like that. And the thing is, Stasis Traps are invis. And when you run into them, they become visible for a short period of time, but you can only quickly react with a Dispel counter. The thing is also, especially when you have a kiting army that has to run away, which against Orc you very often do, it will very frequently be very hard to get something in range to hit the ward to destroy it, especially when it takes multiple hits. Sometimes even with Dispel, it can be hard. Now, I'm all for encouraging more Witch Doctor play, because they are indeed never seen. But I think this is the wrong way to go. If we want to see more play with Witch Doctor and wards, there's another lever to use here, and that's a way safer one. And that is, as with so many things, mana cost. Sentry Ward mana cost already low, we don't need to touch that. But what about Stasis Trap? 100. That's pretty high. What if we make that 85? That sounds okay, right? Sounds worth a try. Heal Ward mana cost was already heavily reduced from 200 to 150, but in all honesty, we still see none of them. So maybe we can go a bit lower. Maybe we can go 135. Is that going to be enough? I'm not sure. But again, there is a sweet spot somewhere to be found. But this is extreme, dude. This is extreme. Wards have to be counterable. If you go through with this change, they might be uncounterable. I heavily disagree with this one. I would much rather see the mana cost reduced. Heal Ward duration then also reduced, which is 5 seconds, okay. But normally they never stand for this long anyways, so not really that relevant. Great Hall build time. Okay, I talked a lot about expansion play earlier. And I like this change, but when I suggested this change in my patch notes, I wanted to see it with a host of other changes. I didn't just only want to see the orc expansion easier. I wanted to see fast expansion everywhere easier because of a later tech for everyone. Also Night Elf expansion, cheaper and faster. Undead Expo, a bit more sturdy. Human didn't need much help in my opinion because they can fast expand the best already. I do like this change in general, but it's not fine in a vacuum. You can't just only do this change and nothing else. First of all, if Orc gets an Expo buff, Night Elf also needs an Expo buff. And secondly, if Orc gets an Expo buff, but the rest of the meta doesn't change, this is not exactly fair. Orc already in the normal meta, for example, expands a lot against Night Elf and against Human on tier 2. They attack to tier 2, get the second hero, get the tier 2 units, then they expand, and then normally when they hold the expansion, they win. You can't just only do this and nothing else. So first of all, this number is too high, or in this case, too low. This should be 130 seconds, and then I think it would be more fair. But then also, Night Elf expansion has to be 10 seconds faster, in my opinion. It's not fair that only Orc gets this favorable treatment. Night Elf expansion, of course, has the big advantage of you can place a proxy and then can walk over. But Orc has the big advantage that on tier 2, very often with Ensnare, they can play an aggressive tempo game and they can bully the opponent for a good while and they can expand then safely. Especially against Night Elf also because Night Elf is taking to tier 3 normally. We're going to talk about Night Elf here shortly because they are in a pretty poor state. Also, if Orc can expand easily and Human can expand much more difficult, that wasn't grammatically correct, but you know what I mean. With Militia ammo weaker, and especially with Defend this much weaker, which I strongly disagree with. While I agree that Defend is annoying, I think Human needs it. And I think it's needed for expansion. And I think we want expansions, plural, for everyone. Again, I disagree with this heavily. But yes, Orc could use some help expanding. Indeed. I would like to see this reduced by 10 seconds if the other changes that I suggested are not implemented. But again, then also Night Elf needs some help. Human is looking good with expansion. Undead is looking good with expansion. Let's give the other races also more ability to get there. And don't weaken Human Fast Expo, is what I would add. Okay, however, I think there's more we could do for Orc. There are some changes here the Blizzard suggested already, but I think there's more we could go for. There's quite a few I listed here in my initial suggestions. You can read them all if you want, but I just bolded the most important ones. I think the Farsi was over-nerfed recently. As you guys may remember, a couple of years ago, Farsi Headhunter looked very oppressive, very difficult to play against. And to this day, I cannot fathom why Blizzard decided to nerf the Farseer and not the Headhunters. When the Farseer was only ever a problem with Headhunters. Again, but they nerfed the Farseer by increasing mana cost of Feral Spirit. I think that was a big mistake. It used to be 75, now it's 85. I think it should go down at least to 80. Maybe even to 75. A couple of other changes here as well that might be worth considering. I think giving Troll Region a slight buff could also make sense, but not perhaps critical. Burning Oil, though. Burning Oil is again such an obvious W for Blizzard to get. It is such a crappy unit, such a crappy upgrade. We can go heavy here on a buff and it would be very safe. A very safe buff with zero risk that might encourage new play. Again, this is something that I just don't understand why Blizzard doesn't do it. I'm not saying that, wow, I have all the answers, but it's glaringly obvious that this is something very weak that could use a very meaningful buff. Burning Oil, in that case. Okay, moving on to Night Elf. Nature's Blessing lumber cost reduced. Yep, that's fair. Very expensive. Also, this helps expansion play, so that's a big thumbs up for me. Also, it helps Keeper just a tiny bit, but it's just a small bit, to be honest. Hunter's Hall, also lumber cost reduced. Lumber especially important in the early game. This encourages a bit more Keeper play and Hunter's play. I like that. But I think this is not enough, as we'll get to shortly. Moonstone. This is a big buff. 50% increase on Moonstone. I actually think that's good. I heard some people say that this is too good. I think Starbuck especially said that this is too powerful. I think, though, design-wise, this is very good because Moonwells are obviously very important for Night Elf, but when are they the most important? When you don't have bears. Especially lower-level Night Elves will always play bears, not just because it's strong, but because it's reliable. It's reliable forms of healing. We come back to how strong bears are. Bears cost 255, I think it is, right? Plus some upgrades, but then they become insanely strong. Really strong melee fighters that can heal you for every fresh bear that comes out. If the game is slow, you get multiple heals, and you get roar, blah, blah, blah. We all know bears are amazing. And you get healing from them. Oh my god, isn't that nice? With this Moonstone buff, Night Elves might be less reliant on bears and might be more encouraged to play different strategies. I think this is a very good change, actually. Also, with a longer nighttime window, maybe out on the map, there's more tactical plays you can go for on tier 2 when you already have Ultra Vision. Maybe you can use the Moonstone, look for a Creepjack, and assert your dominance on the map. Maybe you can psychologically trigger your opponent in a certain way. If you go for mid-game Moonstone, also normally you delay your tier 3. I think for the possibility of encouraging other than bear play, I think this is great. I think this is a great change that I never thought about. I think this is amazing. Yeah, I think Sabak especially said this might be too strong. Sabak is an amazing player. One of the best in the world. I think one of the blind spots for pro players is they are very, very biased. And more biased than many others. And if you are familiar with Starbuck's play, especially because of his strength of parry rifles, he has the most difficulty right now against Night Elf. So I feel like he might not see this very clearly. And to be honest, also Grubby, I think, has always had an axe to grind with Night Elf, as many orcs out there. I love this change. I think this is an amazing change. Very, very interesting. Ultra Vision faster, that's also fair. It used to be a tier 1 upgrade, where it was way better against Orc especially, but pretty broken against Orc, I would say. So this is fair as well. Orb of Venom. This is, I think, another example where people will express their frustration rather than perhaps what's necessary with balance and healthy for the game. Orb of Venom is very strong, yes. But Orb of Venom, I think, also needs to be strong. This comes back to my point again of I think tier 3 play should be encouraged. With an orb weaker, tier 3 is less encouraged. Here I contradict myself a little bit with Moonstone, but you can also utilize Moonstone with tier 3 just if you don't play bears with like talent strats and something like that. Orb of Venom is something that the community was talking about for a long time. Triple Orb of Venom was something that can be pretty difficult to deal with, but in my opinion, how do I phrase this? In my opinion, pro play has to take priority here. In pro play, Orb of Venom is very good, but it has to be very good. And it does seem abusable, and it does seem a bit broken that you can stack multiple heroes with Orb of Venom. And it seems weird, I agree, it seems weird that even heroes with an orb like a Naga want to buy an Orb of Venom. Yes, but if we consider balance, I think it's necessary. I think Night Elf needs this strong orb on tier 3. This would be a 10% damage reduction on Orb of Venom. And I don't agree with it. The cool thing about Orb of Venom is also, it enables many different heroes. Keeper is great with Orb of Venom. Demon Hunter, obviously, great with Orb of Venom. Even Potom, even Warden. So I don't agree with this change. Next up, mana burn range decrease. That is something I suggested, and I would love to see. Of course, the Night Elf community, the Discord, the Reddit, have gone up in flames, fittingly for a Demon Hunter, because of this nerf. Now, I understand why. It is a big nerf. And I agree with the nerf. But what I don't agree with is, again, the vacuum part of it. You can't just take Night Elf's best hero, that they basically play everywhere else right now, because they played everywhere else, because all the other heroes are garbage. Garbage. You can't just take their one great hero and nerf that hero and buff none of the other ones. Especially when Night Elf is probably doing the worst right now in competitive. Now, let me say this again. I do agree with this change wholeheartedly. I mentioned the health of the game and the health of the meta earlier, and this will be very healthy for the game. For the Demon Hunter to not be able to mana burn everything always so easily all the time. But you can't just do this. If you nerf this hero, you also have to buff other things. Either you buff Immolation on this hero, or you buff other heroes, which would be way better. We have 4 Night Elf heroes in the altar, and we basically only ever see this guy. We see the Demon Hunter every game, and we see his best friend, the Naga, second, every game. And that sucks. That is boring, and that is not good game design. MG, by the way, we don't even have to talk about this. Yeah, this is fine. Whatever. But mana burn here, this is the key point. This is a good change. Yes, Blizzard. Very good. Very healthy for the game. We all know mana burn is kind of a stupid, outdated mechanic. But you can't only do this. You have to do more than this, man. You have to you have to buff the weak heroes. You have to buff the shitty heroes. So here we come back to my document. And I suggested lots of things here. So first of all, I think also Tree of Life should be buffed. In this case, I would say Tree of Life build time reduction by 10 seconds. Gold cost as well. Not necessary, I think. This is what I suggested with all the other changes that I included in my document. But Keeper of the Grove. Blizzard, what's going on? Are you worried that the community is going to whine about Keeper like they did like 9 years ago? It's a different time. Nobody thinks Keeper is too strong. Look at the competitive games. Look at the Night Elf win rates. Look at the meta. Keeper first doesn't get played ever. Keeper needs a buff. You can argue which buff it is. I would say he should have 1 more base intelligence on level 1, and I think his int gain should be increased from 2.7 to 3. That's not the biggest buff, but it would be meaningful. That would be 2 more int on level 2, for example. That's big. Maybe you think that's enough, maybe you don't think it's enough. Maybe Force of Nature should be reduced by 5 mana. I'm not sure, but the Keeper needs a buff. There's one thing very clear. Keeper is trash. Keeper needs a buff, and it's so obvious. In my opinion, and in almost everyone's opinion. And guess what? There's another hero for Night Elf that is garbage, and that's the Potom. That's why I suggested reducing the mana cost of Searing Arrow from 8 to 5. And I think this is a great change. Give the Potom nighttime vision. That would make her the only specialty hero with nighttime increased vision. Would make her kind of like a hunter, ambusher in the night, which is, I think, sort of her fantasy. You could also go for Searing Arrow damage buff. You could go for True Shot Aura damage buff. You could also change the Owl Scout. Owl Scout right now is a stupid summon. Invulnerable, only looks around. You could give it like a healing aura. But yeah, this is the biggest oversight by far by Blizzard in this patch. Demon Hunter nerf is fine and healthy for the game, but not if you don't address the other heroes. Honestly, even the Warden could be changed into a more healthy state. The Warden right now, the problem is she is insanely dominating late game on level 5 and 6 with Fenrir Knives 3 and Avatar Vengeance, but she's weak in the early game. There are also some adjustments could be made. Make her stronger in the early, but less, impossible to beat, like Exodia in the late game. You could reduce level 3 Fenrir Knives a little bit. You could reduce especially Avatar duration. You could remove invulnerable spirits, make them magic immune with HP. There's so many things you could do, but nothing was done here. This seems, like huge oversight by Blizzard. And then, again, an easy W, so easy, Hippogriffs. I point out down here. Both Hippogriffs and Hippo Riders see 0 competitive play. So just a little buff, just a little gold cost reduction might make them both more viable in pro play. This also is a very safe, very straightforward change. If you feel like 145 is too much of a reduction, you could make it 150, but a little buff to Hippogriffs is obviously, especially a cost reduction buff, is obviously an easy W to get. All right, that is Night Elf done with. Next up, we have Undead coming up. Wand of Negation charges increased from 2 to 4. Problem with Wand of Negation was that it was too expensive. Now, this wouldn't make it cheaper, but it would make it a lot better with 4 charges instead of 2. I think this is okay. Where are we? This change makes sense. Wand of Negation is bad. You make it better. This makes sense. I don't think it's the right change. I think 2 charges is fine, because really what you want to have is Dispel against key units, against key abilities, like Hex especially. Hex is the number 1 most important thing here. So I think having it cheap with low charges would be much better. If this was like 90 or 100 gold, I think this would be the best solution. But I might even be wrong on this. Having 4 dispels for 150 gold, that is certainly over an extended period much more value. So Blizzard might be right on this. My gut feeling would be that the other change would be better to just reduce the gold cost. But this is certainly fair. Now, Ritual Dagger cost reduced, but also charges reduced from 2 to 1, and healing increased from 175 to 200. So that means that for 1 Ritual Dagger, you could get up to 350 healing if you get the full potential, reduced to 200. I wonder where this came from. When Blizzard first introduced the Ritual Dagger, it wasn't healing over time, it was instant healing. Like, there were so many changes on this item. That was absolutely broken. Then they reduced it to do healing over time with lower healing value. I think it used to be 125. Let's go to the Wikipedia page. This was a really cool thing, by the way, that Blizzard did back then, introducing a new item to the game for Undead. And this was a great change, by the way, because before this item, the big problem for Undead was, except for Blight, the only way you could heal in the early game, the only way in the entire game was Death Knight with Coil and Aura, and that was it. And we saw Death Knight every game. And then this, come to think of it, this was actually one of the best changes Blizzard ever made. It gave Undead the ability to heal with more than just DK. New item, Ritual Dagger, total hit points regenerated per charge increased from 125 to 175. Does it not list the PTR changes? Cost reduced from... it doesn't even change. So this must have been some PTR iteration. But on some PTR iteration, it was instant healing, not healing over time. I guess it was never in the live game. And that was just absolutely bonkers. So healing was increased. Gold cost was reduced. And then the item was actually really good already. This is, right now, a really good item. And now Blizzard seems to think it's too good of an item, because while it will be cheaper, it will certainly be quite a bit worse. The 2 charges are especially good. I'm not sure if Blizzard is aware of this, but probably they are. It's especially good because you can buy the item, leave your base, creep one camp, use the dagger to heal. Creep another camp, use the dagger again to heal. This is especially good for expansion play. And again, like I said now a million times, I love expansion play. I think it makes the game better in every regard. And that is one of two reasons why I don't agree with this change at all. First of all, it makes expo play weaker. It makes undead in the early game weaker, where they are already weak. Undead always will need late game, will need tier 3 to really be strong. And the biggest reason why I heavily disagree with this change is it will again encourage undead much more to play one hero, especially now that they have less healing from the dagger. They will perhaps again rely more on Death Knight. Less Cryptlord play, less Lich play, especially with the Lich nerf coming up here. Less Dreadlord play, maybe never Dreadlord play again. This item enabled so many different strategies, so many different heroes for undead, and enabled them to not only play the same first hero all the time. This is why I really, really don't like this change. Undead in general is not in a dominating balance position right now. I wonder how many people now in the YouTube comments are going to whine about Happy, but Happy is like 400 IQ Giga Chad. Happy is not the norm to go by. This, speaking of healthy changes for the game, I don't think this is a healthy change for the game. This again seems to position the Death Knight as perhaps the only viable first hero again. And that would be a damn shame. We had to work, change, experiment, and try to find new ways for over a decade to move away from DK only. Imagine what a shame it would be if now, because of changes like this, we're going to be forced to pivot back into DK first only play. This is, I think, absolutely the wrong philosophy. Absolutely the wrong way. Frost Nova nerf. So this is the second nerf in a row to Frost Nova since the last patch, where the Frost Nova slow duration was reduced, as you may remember. That is going to hit the Lich again. I think it's not unfair, though. Lich is a good hero in the early game, especially with Ritual Dagger, by the way. In the late game, with higher levels, he's got great int gain. He's got good abilities. He's a great orb carrier. Lich is a good hero. This is going to weaken him again. On the upside, maybe it's going to encourage more heroes. But if this Lich change goes through, and this Ritual Dagger change goes through, then we might just be back to DK first only. So please, Blizzard, don't do this. But yeah, the reason why this is kind of fair is because normally the way it works is if a hero has crowd control ability with damage that's pretty strong at range, something like Stormbolt, something like Nova, obviously, something like Impale. And Nova is instant. There's no projectile. There's no way to easily dodge it. The Lich is ranged already. You can have so much coverage with the Lich, so much radius around you where you can be impactful. So I can see this being fair. Nova range is very big. This will be a nerf, obviously, to Lich, but I think it is not inappropriate. Burrow research time reduced by 10 seconds. Okay. I don't think this makes much of a difference at all. Anti-magic shell reduced from 420 to 300. I don't understand why this change is suggested. Banshees are, let's think. They are mostly seen against human, also against undead in case of destroyers and in case of late game. Even against Night Elf sometimes. We saw them recently, to be honest. In a slow game, Banshee play to discourage bears. But why the damage reduction? Maybe Blizzard feels that anti-magic should not render you immune to all damage, but there should be a way to break through, and the barrier is too high. And I feel like that's fair. Let's say a hypothetical scenario, if you have Blizzard and Breath of Fire, and sometimes you should be able to break through the barrier of AMS. 420 is a lot, but 300 is a big reduction. I don't think Banshees are necessarily a balance problem. Maybe this could encourage a nerf here, could encourage again more, ability to overwhelm banshees with enough magic damage. But this is a big reduction, dude. If you want to reduce AMS, shouldn't it be less? Shouldn't it be like 350 or 340? This seems like too much of a reduction in my mind. Narrow Tower cooldown reduced from 1.3 to 1 second, so the attack speed gets increased again. Narrow Tower was heavily nerfed in the past with attack speed reduction and with damage type reduction. Used to be normal damage, now it's piercing. That makes it do a lot less damage against heroes, most importantly. Not much damage, but it adds up over time. It is defensively strong. It makes expansion play a bit better, so I am a fan of this. But, like I said earlier, I think more races need to be encouraged to expand more. With Orc, this is good. This is probably a bit too much. I think this should be 130. But like I said earlier, Night Elf also should have an easier expansion. Either cheaper or faster completion time. Gargoyle ground base damage reduced by 1. This came completely out of left field. I don't know why this change was suggested. So we only see Gargoyles right now against Orc. Orc playing Mass Wyvern, Undead playing Triple Hero with Alchemist, with Gargs to counter the Wyvern. And their ground damage doesn't really matter. This is only really relevant against Night Elf with Dryads. Okay, hold on. There's one exception also. Undead when playing Dreadlord. Wait, did I skip over the Dreadlord? No, I did skip over the Dreadlord. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna get back to the Dreadlord here in a moment. I also skipped over Web. Sorry, I'm blind. I didn't realize this before, actually. Hold on. Mass Gargoyles is kind of stupid against Night Elf with Dryads. And when Dreadlord plays against Human, he can also play Gargoyles. And if Dreadlord gets to level 5, which now might be stronger, easier, with his level 2 Carrion Swarm buffed, I think this change might actually be good. Hold on. It addresses kind of a problem and just a stupid strategy, Mass Gargs against Night Elf. Because Night Elf has the weakest anti-air. When I watched Grubby's video, that certainly I strongly disagree with him about. I think he said Night Elf has so much anti-air. What do you mean they have bad anti-air? I think that is dead wrong. In the mid game, Night Elf has good anti-air, especially with Orb of Venom, but in the late game, not so much. That's why Mass Gargs and Frostworms and Mass Griffins and Mass Dragonhawks are only ever playable against Night Elf, because they don't have sufficient anti-air to deal with that. So there, I certainly disagree. But that's beside the point. I think these changes together actually make a lot of sense. I feel like if Gargoyles are made weaker against ground, which might be fair, they should perhaps also be made a bit better against air. Because the specialty of Gargoyles should be to be melee anti-air counter units. But yeah, I didn't really appreciate this.
Thanks for the early stream.
Change so much before. Yo, thank you very much, Alex, with the resub. Yeah, I think I like this change. So, getting to the Gargoyle change. Getting to the Carrion Swarm Dreadlord, I think some people spoke out against this as not being necessary, and level 2 Carrion Swarm being good already. And it's like, what? What? Good already? Carrion Swarm 2 is good already? The Dreadlord level 2 and 3 is good already? And I feel like this is almost disingenuous. What do you mean it's good? We basically never see Dreadlord, which is a shame, because Dreadlord is a very cool, fun hero. He's by far Undead's weakest hero. And while the Dreadlord level 5 and 6 can be very good, it is glaringly obvious that Dreadlord is weak on lower levels in early game and mid game. I think this is... I don't even think this is debatable. So I heavily agree with this change. I mean, I also made this suggestion, so obviously I agree with it. Now, something else that a lot of people disagreed with is web is now available on tier 1. This suggestion also came from me, and I suggested this because much of this comes back to expansion thinking. I think Fast Expo or Tier 2 Expo should be the way to go for most races in most matchups. I think this just makes the game better all around. And this affects one matchup especially, that is Orc against Undead. If you play one base, this shouldn't really matter. If you play Fast Expansion, this matters a lot. And I think Orc can find ways to play around it, especially if Torrents are stronger, if maybe Headhunter, Farseer is stronger. There's other ways to play around it. I think there's one thing to take seriously here, and that is that Orc versus Undead is in a pretty unhealthy state right now. Not as far as balance goes. Balance is pretty close to 50-50 probably, but it's the same strat every game, super boring, no fun. And that's the Mass Wyvern stuff. And if we pivot away from Mass Wyvern into more expansion play, I think it will be way, way better for the game. Much better. So I agree with this change. Spiked Carapace. Also, heavy buff on this. I think Grubby heavily disagreed with this. I think there was a little bit of bias shining through by Grubby because he was considering the Blade Master attacking the Crypt Lord. And that's, I guess, not something you should do. But the Crypt Lord is not the only hero on the field or the only target on the field. There's like a whole army around him. There's just simply some things you shouldn't be targeting. For example, when you play... there are so many. When you play Gargoyles against a MG Dryad army, you shouldn't be targeting the Gargoyles. There's just some things you shouldn't be targeting. And you also have to consider the meta of how the game is played. If you play a Crypt Lord, especially as a first hero, which is when he's going to be scary in the late game normally, can you afford to go Spike Carapace? I'm not so sure. It doesn't seem like it. That's why I suggested this significant change. Because Spike Carapace is just... we don't see it. That is also, like... Okay, I'm rambling a bit here. I'm not being very succinct. But my goals with my suggestions were about encouraging more expansion play and making the game much more interesting that way. And alongside that, making heroes and abilities that are used very little more accessible to encourage a wider variety of play. And the simple fact is, Spike Carapace basically never gets taken, never gets picked, never has impact, never is relevant. Which is why, just from experience, this just seems to make sense to me. Maybe I have a wrong read here. I can agree that perhaps, because this is just hypothetical for me, maybe this would be too good, but I really can't see it, to be honest. Unless we're overlooking the possible greatness of Spike Carapace. But I honestly do not see it. All right. Well, that was the suggestions for Undead. A couple of good ones in here, and some that I disagree. This is the biggest one. I think this one is very bad for the game. Very bad for the meta. For the health of the meta. I had some other changes here as well. Oh, I made nothing bold here. Is there nothing that I would try to prioritize here? Yeah, no. I don't think there's anything crucial that I feel like they didn't address. Yeah, I'm actually quite fine with this, except for the Ritual Dagger. Life Drain. Now, this is really cool. New idea by Blizzard. Wait, that's Rain of Fire. Rain of Fire range increased again from 700 to 800. This change, along with Defend and the other changes, again, the Defend nerf I heavily disagree with. This change, along with the other changes, might force Undead again to play one base, Ted Fiends into all-in with Rain of Fire. And man, that would be so sad. That would be so sad. I'm fine with this change. Pit Lord is kind of weak, Rain of Fire is kind of weak, but I don't agree with the other changes, especially the Defend change and the Ritual Dagger change, because the two base meta is so much more interesting. I'm sorry that I'm repeating this all the time, but I think it deserves repeating. This is what I meant with the interesting change that Blizzard was proposing here. Dark Ranger Life Drain can now transfer life to a friendly unit. So, same as Siphon Mana, you can now give health over to an opponent, to an ally. That means you're going to be losing health then as well. Very interesting. I can't even speculate on this. I know that Dota has a hero like this. Pugna, I think it's called. Where you can drain life from opponents and also give it to allies. This is really cool. This is a neat idea. I would love to see this come out in practice. Now, I don't think that this has a danger of being overpowered. Because this also takes a skill slot. It's not like the Blood Mage who always has to go Siphon. That's the strength about Siphon, by the way. It's not like if you go Siphon, you miss out on a skill slot, because the Blood Mage, he can't go Banish and Flame Strike. If he does that, he's never going to have any mana at all. But the Dark Ranger, normally, she wants to have Black Arrow. Well, she needs Black Arrow. That's her main purpose, to raise skellies. But also she would like to have Silence. To use that at the right time can be quite impactful, at least in some matchups. In some other matchups, it doesn't do anything. But this is going to stop her from attacking with the Black Arrow, and it will mean she's not going to be able to go Silence. And it encourages perhaps new strats, new plays. I think some people said that this might be too broken. I'm excited to see it, though. I'm not discounting the possibility that this might be too strong. It might be, but I think it's worth trying out. Like the Torrent change, I would love to see this go through and see what it might enable. But like the Torrent change, this is also something that we and Blizzard would have to have a close eye on to make sure it is not broken. I would be surprised if it's broken, but I guess it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Yeah, I also have some more suggestions. And I'm very surprised that Blizzard isn't looking for more changes on the neutral heroes. The neutral heroes, just like some other things I suggested earlier, are such easy Ws. First of all, Tinker. Tinker is a really bad hero. I think his engineering upgrade, which is always a passive he has to get, should give him HP regen as well. I looked at my numbers here again. This might be too high. This should perhaps be 1.5, 3, 4.5, because that's quite a bit of HP regen in the early game. But Tinker, you can't play him as a first hero. Can you play Tinker in any matchup right now? If you ever play Talons against Orc, then yes. But nobody's doing it. It seems very weak on the pro level. Tinker just seems to be a garbage hero right now. Why not buff the Tinker? Isn't that an easy win? Isn't this also an easy lever? You don't have to consider if you want to see Rocket play or Pocket Factory play. Just buff the passive, because he has to go passive that buffs the Tinker. That might encourage more Tinker. I feel like this is an easy addition to be made without risk. Also, something I suggested, which would be, I think, super interesting for the game. I mentioned here, decrease cooldown for neutral heroes as first hero by 5 seconds. So if you go for a Tavern hero first, you can get it 5 seconds earlier. I think would be very interesting, because we basically see no Tavern heroes right now, because the Altar heroes are almost always much stronger. A couple of other suggestions I made here. None of them too important. I think this one, though, is kind of important. Dark Ranger, not really a very relevant hero right now, but she has one specific case where I think she's making the meta worse. Undead versus Orc. I complained quite a bit in this video about Wyvern. I think the mass Wyvern strat is stupid and not fun, and a shame that this is what we have to endure instead of Headhunter play. And I think the Dark Ranger is the main culprit. Once the Dark Ranger gets level 3, with level 2 Black Arrow, it is very, very hard for Orc to beat that army. Which is why I think Dark Ranger level 2 Black Arrow should be reduced from 10 to 7. And it should be increased on level 1 from 2 to 3. This might encourage more Dark Ranger first plays, maybe for Human, maybe for Night Elf. Well, let's be honest, only for Night Elf, because it's kind of weak. It's very strange, because Dark Ranger is very rarely super relevant. But in this one matchup against Orc, she is so oppressive against the Headhunter play. I think this would make that matchup, again, much more dynamic and interesting with more Headhunters being possible. And then this is, I think, also such an easy W. Soulburn is a very weak ability right now on the Fire Lord, despite it having been buffed a couple of times. This might make the Fire Lord more playable, Soulburn more interesting, applicable in more cases now, perhaps, if we reduce the cooldown from 12 to 9. And most importantly, this would be the ubiquitously available counter to Pally Rifle that so many races need. Soulburn can be amazing against Pally. It can be amazing against Blood Mage. You can choose where you want to use it. The problem is, though, the cooldown of Soulburn is way, way longer than both Siphon and Holy Light. If we make the cooldown shorter, the Fire Lord would be a tremendous counter available to every race against this oppressive strategy. I feel like also this is a clear-cut W. A change like this. I would also love to see Alchemist, another one of my favorite heroes, be buffed on Chemical Rage with duration increase and Acid Bomb with a slight buff to the secondary damage, but that is not that important. As you can see, I have a couple of more suggestions I would like to see come through, but the ones in bold here, I think, are the ones that really, really would be so helpful, and I would love to see considered more, because I think that would make this patch quite a bit better. Then we have a lot of changes to creeps that I don't really care about, to be honest. I feel like between races and items and neutral units, neutral heroes, there are a lot of things we should be focusing on. I didn't even bother, honestly, considering these. Okay, that's it. That's my video about this first PTR iteration. Normally the way Blizzard does this is they push 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 PTR iterations. They try to gather community feedback and make their changes accordingly. Yeah, I think there's some really good changes in here. And I think there's some really poor ones in here as well. Just for emphasis, I guess I'm going to point them out towards the end. I think I agree upon hearing other people that this is too strong. Healing and Vampiric Potion. I would love to see this just weakened, the effect of these items, and not it being removed. I think that would be interesting, but I would be also fine. If the majority agree that this shouldn't be at all in the game, then okay, I'm fine with it. I don't really like the Militia armor reduction. I think that makes them too strong defensively, and I heavily disagree with Defend being nerfed. I think this will force Human once more way more into one base game instead of expansion game, which I think is exactly the wrong way to go. What we want is more expansion play. Other than that, these changes are good, but as I showed, I think there should be more changes also included, especially on tier 3. Interesting changes here. Torrents, maybe too strong, but I would love to see it tried out. The Sentry Wards, I think, just too strong. Magic Immunity seems insane here. Seems insane. This also seems a bit too good. And I mentioned some other changes that I was suggesting. Night Elf, I agree with basically everything here. Well, not everything. I don't like the Venom nerf. I get that people are frustrated by it, but I think it's necessary to be good. I do agree with the mana burn nerf heavily. It is a very restrictive mechanic in the game that makes the game more predictable, less experimental, and just more boring. But as I really tried to emphasize, you can't nerf the demon and not buff anything else. Keeper and Podem have to be buffed, especially Keeper. We know Keeper can be a first hero. We don't know about the Podem. Maybe not. But the Keeper has to be buffed. Must be buffed. And I'm shocked, honestly, that Blizzard didn't buff the Keeper. On the changes, I think many of these are really good. Maybe I argued a bit with the numbers. Except for this one, I think Ritual Dagger nerf is a big mistake. And then for neutral heroes, I also feel like there could be more done. Okay, but that's it for me, guys. Thank you all for watching, and that's gonna be it also for the stream today. Like I said, there's some things I have to take care of, which is why I haven't been around so much, but I'm looking forward to being back again soon.